Alright, this is my first YouTube video. We thought we'd do it on a project on our 2000 Sea Ray 400 sedan bridge with the world's smallest swim platform. So in 2016, in February, we undertook the project of adding approximately 22 inches to the back of the boat to give us a lot more room between the dinghy and the transom of the boat. So initially we started out with a full-size wood template that we made in our cabinet shop, brought it over to our aluminum fabricator who essentially traced it and came up with this. So here we have pretty much finished product, all welded up, nice rounded over corners, just the same as the old one. So before anything could happen, any painting or priming, we brought it back to our garage and laid out the new teak over the entire old and new section. So the joint between the old and the new was ultimately going to be covered. So the only point you were going to see was the two small areas where the swim platform joins the transom of the boat. You'll see a small section between the old and the new. Before anything could be primed, we had to sand the whole thing down as it had oxidized, given it was in the shop being fabricated for about a month and then a month over at our own shop. So between palm sander and hand sanding, we essentially sanded it right back to bright aluminum that is now suitable for applying the primer. So here's essentially the underside of the whole extension. You can see the reinforcing components that have been added and the detailing for the vents and how they've essentially made a C shape in order that you don't see those pieces when the vents are laid on top. So blowing off all the loose debris with a compressor gets 90% of it off, but then with the solvent from Interlux we wipe the whole thing down. This essentially got any of the remaining loose particles plus any of the oils that are on the steel from the manufacturing process. So a thorough wipe down of the entire piece was needed before we could apply the primer. So all the components we're using here in the painting and priming process are from Interlux. We have a 3-step process using a 2-part epoxy for the initial coats, then a pre-coat, which is a single part, and then a single part polyurethane top coat. So this is the first step, was the mixing of the 2 parts for the primer, and we've just basically mixed up enough that would work for approximately 1/3 to half the platform. So we had to work fairly quick, but we started just in the corners with a foam brush to get it built up and get into all the nooks and crannies. So we have approximately 4 to 5 coats of this 2-part primer that was applied to the underside and to the top side. So we had to build up enough thickness to meet the specs as set out in the instructions on the product itself. This was probably the most tedious part of it, but given it was the underside of the swim platform, nobody's really going to see it, so neatness wasn't foremost in our minds. Essentially the only portion of this swim platform that's ever going to be seen is the outer perimeter of it and the approximately 1/2 inch on the top and the radius on the outer perimeter of the piece. The rest is going to be the underside. The rest of the top side is going to be covered with the new teak. So here we can just roll everything out to start the build-up process. The platform was made essentially in a horseshoe shape, so it provided a lot of strength when it would be abutting and bolted to the swim platform that's existing on the back of the boat. So there was about the half-inch space would be filled with a backer rod, and we would fill the top side with resin between the old and the new in order to level the surface so the new teak was going to sit perfectly flat. So here we have the finished build-up of 4 coats of primer, actually 5 coats of primer on the top side and the underside, with a light sanding in between the coats. Essentially had to wait approximately 24 hours between coats. We had the garage at approximately 15 degrees Celsius through a rigged up gas fireplace to provide some measure of heat, given it was the middle of March. So once again, here's the inside perimeter where that would abut the existing swim platform. So here we are, light sanding in between the coats, and again we are at the perimeter where we're actually going to see it. We are going to spend a little bit more time getting things sanded back to a perfectly dull, even finish before we applied the next coat. So each coat would be rolled on and then tipped off with a brush, but before each coat, once it was sanded, we would wipe it down with a solvent just to get rid of any loose particles. So before the top coat of polyurethane could be put on, there is a pre-coat. This is the second step from Interlux in order to provide a middle bond between the primer and the finished polyurethane top coat. Here we are with the pre-coat. So we put on approximately 2 coats of that. Then the top coat of polyurethane, which was done on the perimeter and the underside, and you can see the difference between the pre-coat and the polyurethane here. So again, each coat was applied with a roller, foam roller, then tipped off with a China bristle brush, and it was quite amazing at how much that flattened out even on the vertical. So it almost looked like a sprayed finish in the end. So here we have the finished product, ready to be shipped up north to the marina. And you can see how we've pre-drilled as many holes as we could in order that we didn't have any exposed aluminum once holes were drilled. Anything that would have to be drilled on site, including between the old and the new, would be filled with 5200. And here we have the boat being transported to the travel lift, and you can see the 3 supports that were added on the underside to provide rigidity and prevent any deflection. So now we have the finished product on the back of the boat, and you can see how there's just a nice walkway between the transom and the dinghy. The whole goal of this was to make it look like it was factory issue, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. So we could finally mount all the hardware, the pop-up cleats, all the hardware for the dinghy to be supported and tied down. So this is our project for 2016. We're looking forward to the upcoming summer and lots of use. Thanks for watching.